you have to take off the bumper to access the radiator is because you have these two plastic wind fairings that are held in place by the bumper. Hello friend, this video is going to be how to replace or clean your 5th gen 4Runner radiator. So far, there's no other videos on the internet about this specifically. There's some videos about doing other work that shows a little bit of this, but frustratingly, I couldn't find a specific video about this. I'm guessing because these parts aren't dying yet, but I'm dealing with intermittent overheating. Hot days, idling or very, very low speeds, or if I'm doing intense kind of like climbing, anything like that, because the transmission cooler is connected to the radiator on these units, and I realized that my radiator is incredibly dirty. I owe some thanks and an apology to people on 4runners.com who had suggested that maybe my radiator was dirty, but I thought I had looked at it, and I'll explain that in a moment, but I had not checked that my radiator was dirty, and about 3 weeks ago, somehow I found my way into it, and I'll show you how. But if you want to skip to the work, I have timestamps, so you can go ahead and skip, but I'll show you how I found my dirty radiator. So my overheating issue had begun in the summer of 2023, and I just made it by never idling in very hot temperatures. That's a bad solution, but it worked, and I replaced the fan clutch early 2024. That didn't solve anything, even though my mechanic had diagnosed it, showed me that it was slipping. It was the OEM part from 2014, my model. And so, worth replacing, but that wasn't the solution. And the whole time I was learning a lot about overheating diagnosis, but I missed the most simple solution, which should be the first rule of diagnosing, which is look for the easiest solution. I'm gonna show you though why I missed it. And I really don't have an excuse except my own ignorance and stupidity. So I admit that, but let me show you why. So inside of your 4Runner's engine bay here, I already took the plastic cover off. I don't even keep the clips in it anymore. So essentially your simple solutions are gonna be something like your radiator cap. They're gonna be plenty of things. I mean, look for leaks. There's easy solutions, but then lots of people had suggested that my radiator was dirty. And I was looking, and I had cleaned it out, and I thought, no, my radiator's clean. And I had not realized that this is my AC condenser up front. And then about 3 weeks ago, I read on a forum someone who randomly mentioned replacing this piece of foam here. And as of 3 weeks ago, I still had that foam. But I thought, wait a minute, when they said they took this foam off, they realized that their radiator was a separate part from their AC condenser. And again, I admit my ignorance that I did not know this either. And I'll go ahead and show you inside here. I can't show you really well, but you might be able to see how dirty it is. I'll go ahead and show you when I pull it out as well. So for the time being, my hope is that I can clean this off, and then in summertime, I can test if that solves the overheating. If it does, I'm not gonna replace this unit because it's still a good OEM unit, no leaks, everything looks great on it. But unfortunately, Toyota has made this one of the more difficult jobs on the 4Runner. I've done this on other vehicles before, and the radiator is always very easy, but this is gonna be more difficult, and I'll show you why. But while I'm in there, I'm gonna do my coolant. I'm gonna go ahead and change my coolant because it's gonna be worth the work while I'm in there. I'll go ahead and get the video started. There's lots more I could say about my own diagnosis process, about what I've learned through this, but I'll get the work started. Maybe I'll say one more thing before I start the work here, which is some of the things you'll need. So if you're cleaning, I think having a shop vac is gonna be a necessity. 5-gallon measured container. And then your bumper, yes, your bumper is gonna have to go probably on a blanket if you don't wanna scratch it up. And then I bought OEM coolant, the 50/50 pink, and then Valvoline Max Life ATF because I already paid a shop to do my last transmission change, and they used Valvoline. Then the radiator fill funnel tool, 3/8 inside diameter hose. You're gonna need to take your bumper off, so that's a 10 mil on just a ratchet. Any old ratchet will do fine. And then hand tools, 12 millimeter socket on there for the radiator. Maybe I'll need more tools, but then coil cleaner because I'm gonna be cleaning mine hopefully not replacing it. I went ahead and bought my replacement and some replacement hoses because if I need to replace, then I'm not going to want to have to go get it mid-job, and I can always just return this one. So thermostat, I'm also going to do the thermostat while I'm in there kind of thing. So those are the tools that I'm going to be using for the job. Maybe I'll come into finding more tools needed, but we'll address that when I get there. For as much as we love Toyota for their easy repairs, you do have to take off your bumper cover in order to get to the radiator. It's annoying. You'll see why. I've already tried and finagled with it myself to see if I could just get to it without having to do this. It's really hard, next to impossible, to put it all back together. To get it apart, maybe, but to put it all back together. So start by taking off your bumper cover. Look up a different video for that. I'm not going to go into details here, but wheel well bolts under your bumper has bolts usually. My Limited, I cut the front bumper so it doesn't have those. And then there's clips up top. It's a thing. So you have to start with this process. Never forget your magnetics parts tray. In the end, it only takes about 15 minutes maybe to take your bumper off, but it's kind of annoying. I will say that once I got mine off, I was watching someone else's tutorial and I had forgotten. It's easiest to go underneath because you have to unclip your fog lights and you have to unclip your parking sensor. That's what this is. I'm actually missing. Someone broke that off of mine. And so those are both right here. And you're gonna come from underneath your wheel well to get into this area and get a hold of both of those if you have parking sensor and fog light. And then this is the reason why you cannot get to your radiator bolts. You're gonna see why, I'll show you. But if you go underneath your 4Runner, and granted, I have more access than most because my 4Runner is cut, so my bumper is cut, so it has no under lip kind of thing. So I could see all the way up here, and even still, basically the crash bar support still is in the way when you're underneath the vehicle. You cannot see up past this. And then you have this wind fairing that guides air to your condenser. And this also made it next to impossible to see where you're trying to access. So the lower bolt here, you see it doesn't move. And it's because you have to remove this from the radiator support altogether in order to gain access to where you're trying to go. And it's held on here with this 10 mil bolt. So if you can see that there. So if I were to move that, you would end up seeing, and I will move it eventually, but you'll see that is where we're going, because that is the second radiator bolt. So the first radiator bolt is tucked right in here. You can see the bolt head right there. And that's also visible more behind this wind fairing. But that one, you can actually get to that bolt. You can get to it. But this one is pretty much impossible to get to without taking off this plastic wind fairing. Now, again, I was able to get to this without taking my bumper off. Maybe it's because I have more access. I was able to get to it. I got my hand up in there. I got a 12 mil socket actually on this, but I could not figure out how I was gonna get it back together. And so that right there, it's not visible, but that is your bolt. So that's why you have to take off the radiator. You have to take off the bumper to access the radiator, is because you have these two plastic wind fairings that are held in place by the bumper. All right, I'm learning as I go here. I thought that these plastic fairings were held on by a 10 millimeter bolt, but it's not a bolt. It's just these pop sockets right here. So you're just gonna have to pry bar those out. All right, so that's number one right here, holding that wind fairing in. I'm just gonna replace these, I guess. So that's number one. And that's number two, replacing them. So now that these wind fairings move freely, that's more than enough space. I'm not gonna remove it all the way. I'm just gonna go with this. I can now clearly see the access holes for the radiator support. So yeah, I think I could pull this out if I wanted to. I'm gonna leave it. So there you now have it. That right there is the access to the bolt for the lower radiator. So zooming out, yep, this part of the wind fairing tucks and it clips right in there. And when you pull it out, you have access. Same on this side, nothing from there, but right there. So that is how you get access to it. So if you have an easier way, leave a comment, help somebody else out. But now that I have this done, I am going to drain the radiator. There's other videos that are great for how to drain the radiator, how to drain the block over on the passenger side here. I'll probably take the tire off to make my life easy. But you're gonna drain the radiator, and then I'm gonna try to do this by removing just the fan shroud from the radiator. Ideally, I do not want to have to detach the fan clutch. I've already done that once. So I don't want to have to detach the fan clutch. I don't want to have to take out anything else or do any more removal except the radiator. So before I touch the radiator bolts, maybe even before I drain it, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to test if I can just remove this bolt here that attaches the fan shroud, and I'm going to remove this bolt here that attaches the fan shroud. I'm not going to touch the reservoir except to drain it, but I'm not going to touch the reservoir. I'm just going to remove that bolt and the bolt over here, and then I'll show you underneath how it attaches at the bottom. There's no more bolts. So this is facing the front of the car right here. So you're looking at your support brackets, and then you have your yellow drain nozzle. And then right next to the yellow drain nozzle, if you can see, this is where the fan shroud sits into. There's basically just a clip kind of thing here. And so I think I'll be able to just lift up and get that out. But you also might wonder why I'm doing transmission fluid. Well, I'm gonna lose a little bit when I detach this line. I'm gonna pinch it off, but I'm gonna lose a little bit. And also, the transmission lines are connected to the fan shroud. So all the more reason that I'm hoping I don't have to detach the fan shroud and lift that out. I just want to get the radiator out so I can clean the backside of the AC condenser and clean the radiator fins by pulling it out. So that's why I'm gonna go ahead and do transmission service with this. I'm gonna lose a little bit, I know that. So we're gonna go ahead and double up on the service. So your lower hose is down here. I'm not replacing my hoses, I don't think. I have backups, but they look great. So that's the view down here. That clip also right there should be the one you can see here, where I'm hoping that I can just pull the fan shroud up and out after I undo those two bolts. So I'm gonna go ahead and test that and find out. Interruption to tell you a few other things you might find handy. Some radiator hose, like pinch off pliers, or just some regular ones, but with a towel so that you're not cutting your hoses. And then some surface shield, get you some of this, because you should be doing undercoating. You already should be, but if you're not doing undercoating yet, you're gonna find your radiator support is probably rusty, even in places where there is no rust. I swear that radiator support bracket just builds rust, partly because there's a foam support in there, and that foam collects water. Mine was in bad condition. When somebody broke my bumper and I decided to make the best of it and cut it, I found my radiator support was incredibly rusty. Even though I've been undercoating other parts, I'd never looked at that radiator support bracket. So definitely do that. And also you're gonna have to remove your skids probably for this. Just gonna make your life easier, I'm guessing, to both do the transmission service that I'm doing, because you're gonna lose a little fluid. And in order to just have access for visibility, I removed both the engine and the transmission skid. So just a little more information for you. I didn't think about the fact that the coolant jug is attached to the radiator, not to the fan shroud. That makes sense. So I'm gonna have to take that out. I'm pausing to tell you that that bolt right down there is a pain to get to because of the low pressure AC line. However, yeah, once you get these two off, this one here and that one, this last bolt, the one tucked in there, is attached to the fan shroud. So you don't have to take the whole thing out if you don't want to, but I decided I'm already 2/3 of the way there. So I'm gonna take that one out so that I can just dump this instead of having to pull that fluid out of there. So that one right there, just a heads up, is a pain. I really wish I had an electric ratchet right now so that I could get to that. All right, so I'm almost perfectly positive that this is going to come out. No problem here. You can see all the way to the bottom. And you can tell that it's just a clip holding it in down there. I can move it. It's just that the upper hose is in the way. So once I drain this thing and get that off, I just moved the reservoir neck hose. Yeah, once this comes off, I think the fan shroud is just wiggles out of the way, and I'm gonna be able to pull the radiator up and out. So now it's for draining. I'm gonna make sure that I get my hoses pinched off here. So I'm gonna use pinch offs. You're gonna need, probably set some sort of your favorite plier to get the hose clamps off. And then, yeah, once I get hose clamps off, drained and everything, and I'm warm right now, so it should be pretty fast. I don't think it'd be a problem anyway, but I drove it around and now it's cooling down. This is what came out of the reservoir. It's almost brand new. And yeah, this is my measured bucket so that I can just make sure that it seems like the right amount. Yeah, just more data is helpful. So this is the front of the car. There's your radiator drain. I already went ahead and drained my fluid. So I've got a bucket of pink here. And those are your transmission lines as well. So that's where I pinched off. As I pulled up and I used some picks to kind of loosen up the hoses, I pulled them, plugged them with towel, and then I pinched them off right as soon as I pulled them off. So, went really quick. Just be gentle on them so you don't break them. I would make sure you're wearing your glasses so that you don't get fluid in your eyes, but that's up to you. And then I'll show you that once I was able to get this hose off, the lower radiator hose, and there's your transmission line, by the way, and that's pinched off with the towel. You can see it loses a little bit there. But once you're able to do that, then you can move the fan shroud freely. So there's the fan shroud, and it moves, and you can just barely get it past the lower radiator hose inlet so that you could pull that up and out, I think. So we're about to find out. The cheapo orange picks from Harbor Freight are famous for a reason. Get in there, you gotta break the seal on your hoses. This is how I did the transmission as well. I figured it'd be easier to show here. You get underneath, be gentle, don't pry too hard or pull too hard, but once you get underneath and you go all the way in, you should be able to kind of pull it up, break the seal essentially, and then comes right off. And you do the same with all the hoses. So again, probably not my preference to replace hoses if they're perfectly good, and these are OEM hoses, but this one, I don't know, the imprints are pretty strong, so we'll see. I think I'm gonna leave it, should be fine, but maybe I'll regret that later. All right, now that this hose is off, I'm gonna do my 4 bolts and then see if I can't just lift this thing out. Hopefully, again, fan shroud doesn't have to come out too. Okay, just in hopes of being helpful, I removed this one. It's gonna be a pain to get this thing back in, but I went ahead and removed it because you can see how easily accessible that bolt is there. And then you can see that bolt there. So those are your two bolts. Radiator support bracket bolt, and then the upper bolt kind of tucked in the frame. So coming in from the top right here is easy enough with hand tools, but having it removed is gonna make it a little easier. I didn't remove that one just because this was a serious pain to get out, but I wanted to be able to show you that this is your second radiator bolt location. So there's your upper, there's your lower, and that's gonna be a nice picture for the forum. These are all 12 mil bolts, and I think about a 6-inch extension is probably gonna be easiest for these. Comes right out, and it is rusty. So I'm gonna have some Never Sees ready. I'm also, again, I'm gonna take some surface shield, some undercoating, anything, fluid film, whatever. I'm gonna put that in various places that I see are rusty right now. So yeah, this is getting Never Sees when it goes back. If you're choosing not to remove this, like I'm not gonna on this side, then again, I still think you should be able to get in here. And I already loosened that one up, and out it comes. And it's stuck in there. So I'm gonna have to get my magnetic grabber. In order to get this one, I think the best bet is using a long 12 mil and a very short extension, or vice versa, using a little 3-inch extension and a short socket. And you can go in from the top and then actually get this hand underneath here in order to place it on the bolt, find the head of the bolt, and then once you're on it, you should be able to have a little bit of working room like this. So here we are. So now we're gonna find out how finicky this thing is to try to pull. I know I'm gonna have to work around some transmission lines in here. This is gonna be tricky. I don't know if it's gonna be possible because the transmission lines connected to the back of the fan shroud are looking like they're not gonna give me the clearance that I need here. That is gonna be the problem. I'm kind of solving this in real time here. These transmission lines are mounted on the back of the fan shroud right there with a 10 mil bolt. So once those transmission lines are a bit more flexible maybe, then I can get in here. But for right now, I'm cleared on that side, or I can be if I move it enough. But this side, I'm gonna have to work to get that clear of that transmission line right down there at the bottom. If you can't see that, there's a silver transmission line. So, yep, we're gonna have to work that out. Once you get that 10 mil bolt out of there, you have the flexibility to move the transmission lines just on the other side of the pipe, just one of them on the other side of the AC pipe here. And then while you do that, once you do that, you now have the freedom to wiggle the radiator. And then this is where this is an extra hands kind of helper job, pulling it back from each of the blockages, kind of every little piece that blocks it from coming up. So it's either going to be having some helping hands or removing the fan shroud and the fan clutch. If you choose to do that, that's up to you. I'm going to find some helping hands and get this radiator out. So I ended up actually laying under it, kind of finagling from the lower side. I was able to see that the lower radiator hose is also kind of making contact with the line. When I moved that out of the way, then I was able to finally kind of push everything up so that all the connections are clear. And then from there, now it's probably just a wiggling this thing out of here, out of the top. And this, I think, is my overheating issue. Now, why did I pull the whole thing out? Partly because I want to inspect it. I want to take a look at how the radiator is doing, what condition it's in. Partly because this overheating issue, I just want to solve it one time. I just want to pull this out. I don't want it to have possibly been something else or that I didn't clean it well enough. So I want to clean this thing thoroughly and then clean the backside of the AC condenser as well. I could have bought one of these two tools. Let me kind of put them on screen here. These two tools maybe could have helped me out, but I think mine was too far gone. So you should make this part of your preventative maintenance. Make this a part of your schedule here to clean these out, to brush inside or to blow it out. Do something like that. If light cannot get through this thing, then wind is definitely not getting through this thing. And I am holding my flashlight behind this, and this area here is almost the only area. I get a few other spots where you can see the flashlight, but lots and lots of this thing is completely covered. And I have a suspicion as to why. I just thought of this before and as I was doing this project. When I bought this thing, the previous owner did not have a skid plate underneath. I don't know why. I'm guessing some oil change place took it off and never put it back on, but I didn't find it until I started doing my own oil changes. So it has probably driven for a long time without a skid plate, and I'm guessing that's how all of this got caked on by coming up through as the fan was trying to pull stuff through. No skid plate meant all that was coming up. So now I'm going to shop vac this and get to cleaning it. And there's the backside of my AC condenser. AC condenser is more tolerable in terms of its cleanliness, but it's still pretty bad on the backside here. So that's the side that faces the radiator, and I'm going to end up cleaning that pretty good as well. By the way, the backside here definitely has some bent fins, but these are not nearly the same amount. I mean, look, you can see the light passing through there and you can't anywhere else. So those are more than likely not the culprit, I'm guessing, but I figured I'd show you. I do have some bent fins. All right, a lot of this is stuck in there really bad. So this is the coil cleaner I'm using. Again, I don't have an air compressor. I just have a shop vac that can blow in both directions. The shop vac is not strong enough to condense, press air through this. So I shop vac'd it. I did the best I could. And I think I decided before I rinsed it out, I am gonna go ahead and spray this, even just if that first round helps. Maybe I'll have to do another round, but this coil cleaner is gonna be able to sit on there for a few minutes and hopefully it kind of softens it up, maybe gets things moving just a little bit. We'll see. This is almost unbelievable to me, the fact that it's getting this clean. This is already light years better than it was before, and I'm gonna do a second coat. I did remember, you need to spray from the back towards the front. So wherever the connections are, you need to spray from that side to the other side so that you're not pushing more things through. That was a mistake I almost made. But yeah, I'm gonna do another coat from the back side. I'm gonna spray down more of the coil cleaner from the back side and then spray out from there because I'm hoping it seeps through more than it came through on the front. So let's do that. I forgot to warm up the can on my first go around. I always warm up aerosol cans, almost always. It helps get out more of the product. So I forgot to do that. It's definitely foaming more this time. Now I'm gonna go do it on the coil while the AC condenser while this is foaming, and then we'll come back. And there you can see it's soaking on the AC condenser. Now I'm probably gonna wait to spray that out until I put the radiator back in, just so that I don't have to work on the sopping wet ground. It's already a little bit wet from fluids. So you can see it coming through. The AC condenser was a heck of a lot cleaner somehow than the radiator. I have to suspect that because I did not have skid plates, it was coming up through the center between this tiny little gap of the radiator and the AC condenser, because Again, the AC condenser is so clean that you've got clear light coming through, and you have even the foam just coming right on through. So AC condenser, lots cleaner than the radiator was. All right, I'm gonna let this drain out a little bit, but I wanna show you already what I can see, which is the light is now visible from everywhere on it. Of course, the coils at certain angles make it harder, but I can see my flashlight from everywhere in here now. That is a huge difference from before. So I've cleaned up the radiator, I've cleaned up the AC coils. I did go ahead and wash out the AC coils. I just figure I can lay in wet, but I don't want to mess with leaving the cleaner on there for too long. So I'm gonna do my thermostat while I'm in here. Again, there are other videos about this. It is a very easy job. It is 3 bolts right there. And I already bought my replacement thermostat. So because I have my replacement thermostat, I'm just gonna do it. It's a cheap part. It's a good part to replace as preventative. Then I think I'm gonna end up returning the radiator and the hoses that I bought. Maybe someday in the future I'll go OEM. These were from Advanced Auto. I'm just gonna take it back in its packaging because I think that my radiator is actually gonna be clean enough. So right now, that's the back of it, which was pretty clean before. But then this is the front. Yes, I know it is worse for wear, but this is a clean radiator in comparison to what was there before. The fins are in decent shape, probably bad shape, but they are going to cool because now you can see light through them. Yes, that bar of light is not a flashlight. That's just my driveway. So yes, I am gonna keep this in there because that will get airflow. Here, keep your magnetic parts tray nearby. I got the thermostat off. Here's the new thermostat. Here's the old location where the old one was. And honestly, the old thermostat looked pristine. I'm gonna keep it around as a spare part. I did the same thing with my fan clutch. After replacing my fan clutch and finding out that that did not solve my problem, I just decided I'm gonna keep that fan clutch around just in case, if for anything, happens. But I'm gonna put the new thermostat in and we'll go from there. Okay, I think I found that if you remove that hose clamp, this is your lower radiator hose, zooming out a little bit. I think if you remove that white plastic clip, it would make your life a lot easier. A lot of the lacking flexibility here is because of that. On this side, you need to put those transmission lines on the other side of the AC line right here. Just that one there will give you a ton of flexibility. But then this whole side opens up quite a lot. This side though remains tight, and I'm finding that it's almost entirely because of that clip there. So I think I'm gonna undo that, and then I might get some extra hands to help me go ahead and drop the radiator back in. Let me go ahead and also quickly mention that my coolant looks almost perfect. So I really probably didn't need to change it. I'm not gonna drain my engine block. The drain is over on the passenger tire area on the engine. I'm not gonna drain that. This looks almost perfect. I've really only ran this fluid for about 50,000 miles. Conservatively, I could replace it because the engine has gotten hot a few times, but the coloration is perfect. I'm putting in almost half of the coolant, brand new. So I'm just gonna put the radiator back in and live with refilling the radiator and going from there. So here you have the cleaned radiator. Again, it's worse for wear, 200,000 miles on it, OEM part, but it's clean enough for testing this summer. When the summer rolls around, I'm gonna find out if I need to replace it or not, but I'd rather not throw parts at a problem and find out later that maybe I didn't even need to if it still overheats and it's the cause of something else. So I'm gonna save my $300 for the OEM radiator or $200 for this advanced auto one, which I'm also not impressed by the advanced auto, go figure, but the CarQuest premium part looks like the fit and finish is just awful compared to the OEM. So I would probably spend the $300 for the OEM one in the future, or maybe get the OEM equivalent off of Rock Auto or something. But anyway, this is gonna go back in and we're gonna find out sometime in the summer if this solved the overheating, and I'm about 99% sure that this should have solved it. So I'm gonna put it back in now. I'll also note that I looked down the drain area and everything else about this radiator looks perfect. The coolant came out incredibly clean. The fins on the inside that I can visibly see look great. Everything looks really clean on it except for the face of it having, again, a little worse for wear. So I'm putting it back in. I'll do that now. Once you get it set in like this, I think if you don't have extra hands, going from underneath and shaking it until, you know, the rest of it falls through is good. And then put your bolts in. I recommend getting these top bolts set in there first before doing the bottom ones, because the bottom ones are going to fight you. You're going to have to lift the radiator. It's going to be probably a hassle. So yeah, get these top bolts in first, get these set in their place. And I think for torque specs, I'm gonna use the German Gutentight. So as long as they are tight, I think it's gonna be fine. We'll find out. All right, I've got the bolt prepped on the extension with a little bit of anti-seize rust problem, you know, living in a rust area. And I can see through here, I can actually see where I'm trying to line this thing up. And then I'm just gonna basically get it all the way in by hand until I can tell that it's tightening it down. And that's when I'll grab my ratchet. So that is tight by hand, and it didn't come off, so there we go. No kidding, every single time I work on my 4Runner, I have a can of Surface Shield ready. Fluid film, take your pick, have it ready, find rust, knock it off, spray paint it if you want, but just put anything on it. I've got everything buttoned back up here. Just do the whole thing in reverse. Put your fan shroud back on, put your coolant reservoir back on, put the hoses all back on, clip them on, make sure they're ready. If you did your thermostat like I did, make sure that that's all buttoned back up. I think it was like 5 foot-pounds for those bolts, almost nothing. You could probably go hand tight, but yeah. So the radiator looks significantly cleaner. Now I'm just gonna put good fluid in it and burp it and go through that process. There's great videos for that. I'm not gonna make a video about how to burp it. But I will say, I'm curious to see in the summertime if this is gonna overheat. The coolant looked perfect, so I'm not gonna put the old coolant back in it, but the old coolant looked perfect. I ran that fluid for 50,000 miles, and yeah, I feel pretty confident that I'm gonna be able to just run this new coolant and this will solve the issue. All right, that is it for this project. I burped the radiator, which was harder than I imagined because it's cold outside, the rain is coming down, and the airflow is so good now that the engine was having a hard time coming up to temp. But I've buttoned it all up. I hope this video is helpful if you're trying to do a radiator swap or cleaning on this 4Runner. Seriously, make this a part of maintenance. Just clean out the radiator. It's so easy to do if you make it a maintenance item. Just take this piece of foam off. If you want to put it back on when you do it, that's fine. So I hope this was helpful, and I'll update you when it's hot outside if this solved my overheating.